Students gifted with a keen intellect and unwavering discipline may walk the path of the mage. The arcane magic available to Magi is both great and dangerous, and thus is revealed only to the most devoted practitioners. To avoid interference with their spellcasting, Magi wear only cloth armour, but arcane shields and enchantments give them additional protection. To keep enemies at bay, Magi can summon bursts of fire to incinerate distant targets and cause entire areas to erupt, setting groups of foes ablaze. Mages devote their lives to mastering the art of magic, and one can spend their entire life studying the arcane and still never come close to unlocking all of its secrets. Not every being in Azeroth is in tune with the flows of magic, and those that are have varying degrees of attunement. Skilled mages are able to manipulate the flow of magic, shaping it into a forceful blast of arcane energy, freezing the ground around them to stop enemies in their tracks, and are even able to shoot balls of fire at their foes. When needed, mages can also polymorph their opponents into something less threatening. Mages are trained to use frost, fire, and arcane to control the battlefield. All forms of magic are powerful in their own rights. Together, they are deadly. Frost mages specialise in freezing enemies in place with frost novas and slowing foes with spells before shattering them with shards of ice. Frost mages are also able to encase themselves in blocks of ice, deflecting all harm that comes their way, whether it's an axe or a spell. The water elemental that frost mages summon to fight for them make for a deadly combination, the elemental soaking their opponent whilst the mage freezes them solid. On the other end of the arcane spectrum, fire mages lash out with balls of fire, hurled with deadly precision at their enemies. Fire mages, also known as pyromancers, specialise in dispatching opponents quickly with devastating pyroblasts, reducing foes to ash before they even know what hit them. An arcane mage specialises in pure arcane power, stringing together chains of arcane missiles and explosions of arcane energy to destroy multiple foes or barrage one single target. The arcane school of magic also has other tricks in its spellbook. With the ability to conjure food and drink, the mage can survive almost indefinitely in the field, and with the ability to open portals to major cities, they can quickly span continents and arrive safely amongst allies. Skilled arcane mages can also blink short distances, teleporting themselves forward literally in the blink of an eye, and even turn themselves invisible for a short time. Arcane mages always have a trick up their sleeves or in their spellbook to get out of danger. The mage city of Doloran is home to the Kirin Tor, a faction of mages that dedicate their lives to studying the arcane arts and cataloguing their finds in the vast libraries of their city. The Kirin Tor was founded shortly after the destruction of Doloran and consisted primarily of humans and elves. Over the years, they have begun to accept members of other races into their ranks, but are still mostly populated by the humans of Lordaeron and the elves of Silvermoon. The ability to control the flows of magic is found in many of Azeroth's races, and all but the Tauren are capable of tapping into the arcane. The earliest use of arcane magic in Azeroth's history can be traced back to the Night Elves. The Night Elf mages from Azeroth's ancient times were known as the Highborn, and formed the highest caste of Night Elf society. When their members attempted to open a portal to the Twisting Nether and herald the arrival of the demon lord Sargeras into Azeroth, the aftermath of the ensuing war tore the world asunder. The surviving Night Elves banished the Highborn from their lands for their actions and outlawed the use of arcane magic, the punishment being a death sentence if anyone was caught using it within the Elven lands. For thousands of years the Night Elves have shunned the arcane arts, even whilst their allies in the Alliance continued to depend on them. However, during the events of Deathwing's Cataclysm, the exiled Highborn that had taken the ancient elven city of Eldrith Alas, better known nowadays as Dire Maul, as their home, resurfaced and offered the power to the Night Elves once more. The faction of Kel'Dai mages, led by Mordant Evenshade, have since found it difficult to reintegrate into Elven society, and are met with resentment from most other Night Elves, especially the Druids. Only time will tell if the Highborn will once again hold a place of esteem amongst the ranks of the Night Elves, or if the distrust will prove too great for them to ever be accepted for the crimes they committed over 10,000 years before. After the Great Sundering of Azeroth, the world split and divided into two main continents. A group of surviving Highborn that didn't journey south took their exile from Kalimdor across the newly created oceans to the eastern continent. It was here that they built the Sunwell, a fount of mystical power at a convergence of powerful ley energies. Changing their names to Keldorai, or High Elf in the common tongue, the exiles formed a new civilization around their city of Silvermoon and the forests of Eversong. The High Elves relied on the arcane for all their power, and mages were very common amongst their kind. After the Third War, where Arthur sacked Silvermoon City and his undead army destroyed the Sunwell, the High Elves changed their names to Sindorai, Blood Elves, in honour of their fallen kin. Now left without the Sunwell as their arcane power source, many Blood Elves turned to other forces of power. However, the Blood Elves were not going to turn their back on their heritage, and many Sindorai mages reverted to drawing arcane energy from the very land around them, rather than the concentrated energies of the Sunwell. Being amongst the oldest users of ley magic, the Blood Elves are without a doubt amongst the most powerful spellcasters on Azeroth. The human kingdom of Strom had always been in turmoil with the forest trolls in those lands. For years the human and troll armies clashed, with no end to the war in sight, until the High Elves of Quel'Thalas lent their aid and offered to teach 100 humans the arcane arts. This was the turning point the humans needed, and soon the troll armies were defeated and the humans were able to reclaim their lands. Unexpected to the elves, the humans were a very adaptable race, and soon the arcane teachings they had learned spread through their number. By the time the kingdom of Strom had fallen and the Third War had passed, magic had become a large part of their society. It was these humans that went on to become part of Sylvanus' undead Forsaken, the Worgen of Gilneas, and the humans of Stormwind. It is to this end that the humans, Forsaken and Worgen all have comparable skills in the arcane. The humans and Worgen of the Alliance tend to specialise in the School of Fire and Arcane, whilst the Forsaken have embraced the cold blood their undeath has brought them and turned more toward the School of Frost. These races are amongst the highest population of arcane users on Azeroth, and their mages continue to be a large presence to this day, despite the numerous invasions, curses, and cases of bad luck that have befallen them. Having suffered numerous crushing defeats at the hands of the humans since the introduction of mages to their armies, the trolls were forced to adapt or be wiped out entirely. After the Third War and the invasion of Doloran by Arthas and his undead army, it is possible that some of the surviving mages were either taken in or captured by the trolls of the north. It is even possible that from these mages the trolls learned their arcane ways. Another explanation could be that the trolls somehow managed to be affected by the arcane magic that was used on them during the wars with the humans and picked up a natural affinity for it. Either way, in conjunction to their spiritual ancestry, the trolls have adapted a form of magic unique to their kind. Under the guidance of their Forsaken allies in the Horde, troll mages are beginning to become a more accepted, although still uncommon sight amongst allies. The Orcs of Draenor had no natural affinity for the arcane, instead leaning more heavily towards physical prowess to achieve victory on the field of battle. When any form of otherworldly power was used by the Orcs, it came in the form of ancestral guidance and power gifted from the elements. However, Kil'jaeden's plan to corrupt the Orcs with the blood of Manoroth succeeded, and a handful of Orc shaman were gifted the powers of Shadow and became the first Warlocks. It was these Warlocks that helped the Orcs during the First and Second War and played a large part in their victories over the humans. Years later, when Thrall became leader of the Horde, he strongly discouraged the use of Warlock magic, and so some Orcs found other sources of power. It is a good possibility that their troll allies shared with them the knowledge to control the arcane, and so the first mages came about. However, with the power of the arcane mixed with their natural strength and fortitude, an Orc mage on the battlefield is a threatening presence, and one that is becoming more and more common as the ways of the Warlock slowly fade from memory, and the era of the Mage begins. The intellectual curiosity of the gnomes has been the driving point of their race. Gnomish inventors pave the way forward as they build and test their latest technology, whilst at the same time Gnomish mages sit at the forefront of magical experimentation, gazing into the unknown that is the arcane. Gnomes love to experiment, and the arcane arts are no exception. Gnome mages are constantly pushing the boundaries and limits of their powers, and since a few of their number have been granted membership amongst the ranks of the Kirin Tor, the vast libraries of Dalaran have grown quicker than any human or elf could have anticipated. Gnomes have managed to plant exceptional doubt in the minds of anyone that would state bigger is better, as gnome mages, despite their diminutive stature, are some of the most powerful spellcasters on Azeroth. In fact, so well regarded are gnome mage combat skills and ability to think quickly in tight situations that the Alliance often put them in the front lines of a battlefield, something that would be thought twice of in any other situation. When the gnomes lost their ancestral home of Gnomuragon to a Trog invasion, it was the dwarves of Ironforge that offered them sanctuary within the walls of Ironforge. Long-time allies were the dwarves and gnomes. The dwarves even offered the gnomes a place to practice their magic, converting their mystic quarter to accommodate arcane practices alongside the dwarves' recently introduced holy order. It is a strong possibility that this is where the dwarves began to properly consider magic as a combat form. It was rare that any dwarf displayed an affinity for the arcane, but nonetheless, those dwarves that were willing were taken under the wing of the gnomes, who were more than happy to share their arcane knowledge with their cousins. Although the dwarves are new to most forms of magic, they have proven that not all of their race are stubborn, as some amongst their ranks step forward into the great unknown of the arcane. The Eredar were natural magic users on their home planet of Argus, and after the destruction of their world by the Burning Legion, the newly named Draenei of their time kept with the tradition of wielding and practicing the arcane. Now, one of the oldest races in the universe, the Draenei have come as close to mastering and controlling the arcane flows of magic as any other race. A benefit that having such long lifespans has granted them is that each individual Draenei mage has a long time to work on their powers before passing the knowledge down to newer generations. A stable and wise race, the mages within the Draenei are without a doubt amongst the most powerful and knowledgeable in the known universe. On the other end of the spectrum, and relatively new to the touch of arcane magic, the goblins treat the arcane as a tool for personal profit. A common goblin saying is that with great power comes great profit, and within goblin society any advantage you can get over a rival should and will be taken. This is precisely why goblins, who, since their exposure to the Khajiamite that granted them a higher level of intelligence, have made a foothold within the arcane community. It is their cultural outlook on the arcane that sets the goblin mages apart from most other races. The elves and gnomes especially look down upon goblin mages because they do not venture into arcane experimentation and knowledge to share with the others. They do it purely from a selfish standpoint. But we can't hold this fact against the goblins, it's just in their nature. The Pandaren have a history as long as the Night Elves and are amongst Azeroth's oldest native races. They are no strangers to the arcane, and around the time of Queen Ashara's reign and the Highborn experimenting with the power contained within the Well of Eternity, the Pandaren already had a better understanding of how the arcane energies the Night Elves were toying with would lead to something dangerous. The Pandaren sent a contingent of explorers with a gift for the Highborn, along with a message, a box that contained all the arcane power the elves would ever need. The box, of course, was empty, and the message clear. The Pandaren believed that the Night Elves did not need to rely on their arcane power and should reconsider their ways before it was too late. Many years later, after the Great Sundering of Azeroth, the Pandaren's land of Pandaria was separated from mainland Kalimdor and became a continent of its own. It is highly possible that the Pandaren at this point never really used arcane magic, but also, true to their nature, never forgot its power. The Pandaren that left their home on the back of the giant turtle Shenzin Su had a more inquisitive and less contented nature than their brethren back on Pandaria, and began to experiment with alternate forms of magic. This would have led to a few amongst the Pandaren of the Wandering Isle attaining the understanding and knowledge to become a mage. Although Pandaren mages are an uncommon sight, the dedicated nature of Pandaren could mean that one day their mages will attain the same levels of power as the Draenei, elves and gnomes. Whilst most mages would be considered powerful by those with no control over the arcane, amongst the spellcaster community there are some mages that are considered legend. These mages have reached a level of knowledge and understanding that the students of Doloran hope to one day attain for themselves. Most never will. One such mage is Ronin. Once he was shunned by the Kirin Tor for his reckless use of magic that led to the deaths of several other mages, and despite it being an accident on Ronin's part, he was pushed to the edge of Magi society. Seeking penance for his mistake, Ronin accepted what many thought was a suicide mission and travelled south from Doloran and into the wetlands to the very heart of the Dragonmaw Orcs in Grimbatol. His mission was to free the Dragon Queen Alexstrasza from the clutches of the Orc clan deep inside the cursed mountain fortress. Ronin succeeded in his mission and went on to assist in the ensuing battle between Deathwing and the other 4 dragon aspects over the skies of Grimbatol. It was in this fight that seemed lost to them that Ronin destroyed the Dragon Soul, releasing the powers stored within it back to Alexstrasza, Ysera, Malygos and Nozdormu, thus enabling them to defeat Deathwing and force him into hiding once again. Many years later, as leader of the Kirin Tor, Ronin travelled to Theramore Isle and attempted to stop the Horde forces from detonating the mana bomb, a device that would kill everything within miles of its blast radius. In his last few moments of life, Ronin attempted to soak the detonation of the mana bomb's explosion. In doing so, he would certainly die in the process, but enabled time for his wife Verissa Windrunner, Jaina Proudmoore, Caligos and General Chandra's Feathermoon to escape the blast. Ronin left his legacy in his 2 half-elven twin sons, and his work to help change the future of the Kirin Tor will be carried on by his successor, Jaina Proudmoore. With the events of the reopening of the Dark Portal into Draenor, Archmage Khadgar has returned to the front of the conflict. Once the apprentice of the legendary mage Medivh, Khadgar learned a great many things from his time spent in his master's tower of Karazhan. After Medivh's death, Khadgar went on to fight the orcs that had invaded Azeroth and was instrumental in pushing them back through the Dark Portal and into Outlands. The only option left to the Alliance expedition that had ventured through the portal to ensure the orcs would not return to Azeroth was to destroy the portal from the other side. Khadgar was amongst the soldiers that opted to stay behind in Outlands and destroy the portal. It was assumed by the Alliance that all had been killed after the portal collapsed, and so monuments of the fallen were erected at the gates of Stormwind, Khadgar's statue amongst them. It was only after the opening of the Dark Portal into Outland once again that it was discovered that Khadgar and the others had not all perished, and so Khadgar assisted in ending the threat once and for all in Outland. He chose to stay behind in Outland to learn what he could from the celestial being Adal in Shattrath City, and was not seen for many years. Now, with the threat of another orc invasion into Azeroth, Khadgar stands once more on the front lines, leading the way through the portal and into the orcs' homeworld of Draenor. It is here that Khadgar seeks to stop the threat of the orc warlock Gul'dan before the orcs' plans destroy everything they have been working toward. Khadgar is easily one of Azeroth's most knowledgeable and skilled mages, but he alone is not strong enough to fight the Iron Horde, and he knows it. The ways of the mage are not to be taken lightly. You have been gifted the power to wield the arcane, shape and control its flows. There is a reason why some are distrustful of those with the ability to summon a flame from nowhere or teleport across entire continents. They fear the power you have at your fingertips. You are beyond the feeble ways of using physical strength to exert control. Your power lies within and is limitless. There is no end to what you could accomplish. You are a mage. You are magic itself. You will take to the battlefield and with a few words and a quick gesture lay waste to your enemies the only way you know how, shaping the arcane to your will, freezing the earth around you and incinerating anything that is left. Your power is endless.